Sunday.
And you're killing at this sports talk thing. You're killing.
Yeah, it's a crime. You're right.
And you pick great support people, too.
This is true. Now, that is true. Chuck McKinley hanging out. Brian Houston here on this side of the glass. Great to have you here on Brian Houston Sports Radio Live on 99.3 Talk FM. Hey, by the way, before we get to Matthew Postin, I want to say hello to a buddy of mine, Marty Jones. Got hit about 3 weeks ago by a drunk driver.
Oh, my gosh.
And she was very, very fortunate because it destroyed her vehicle, but the biggest damage, it crushed her right foot. Okay, so that's all. I mean, that's all, though. So from the standpoint of what it could have been, we could have had a funeral.
Sure.
Okay. Well, she's in the hospital in Tyler right now. She lives in Gladewater. She asked me on Twitter today, did you save me any candy corn? My family loves the stuff. So I wrote back and I said, yeah, we got a 10-gallon drum of it in the break room there. We'll just bring it all to you. So gather that up. I'm going to take that to Marty with the licorice, and she can abuse her children. And I'll just blame it on the whatever medication she's on right now.
Happy cavities.
But Marty, we love you, and we hope you get well soon. She's having a lot of problems with infection, been in and out of the hospital. And she's a runner and a bicycler, and
God bless her.
And so she's so used to being active, and now she's kind of having to hang out in hospitals all the time.
And the fact that she still has her sense of humor over this whole thing.
Great lady, really neat lady. So if she didn't hear this, those of you who are friends of hers, tell her we talked about her and we love her. And I hope she does well and gets better. In the meantime, we will gather up the candy corn.
Wow.
It's such a sacrifice, but we're going to give you the candy corn, Marty.
That's what I like about you, Brian. You are a giver, man.
This is true, man, especially if it's something I don't want.
Yes, and you can have this broccoli, too, while you're at it. Jeez.
Oh, look, I found a can of pickled beets here as well. This is great. It'll be the trifecta.
I'm going to find some bleach and gargle in the meantime.
Bleach. Wow. All right. We're going to hammer the Cowboys from an expert perspective right now from Rattle and Hum Sports. It's a website. You can check it out, rattleandhumsports.com. With us right now covering the Dallas Cowboys on the APEC VIP hotline. Cutting edge training for the serious athlete, apecgo.com. Joining us now, Matthew Postins. How you doing, Matthew?
Hi, Brian. So are you saying that I'm going to hammer the Cowboys?
No, I'm just saying that if you do hammer them, it will be from an expert standpoint as opposed to the amateur standpoint that we've been listening to for a while.
Well, I'm not sure that I could do much better than the amateurs, but I'll give it a shot.
All right, go ahead. Hammer away. What is it that right now just, and maybe this is the wrong way to put it, but what is it that right now it just drives you crazy about this Dallas Cowboys football team?
Well, I think if you're looking at it from a completely objective perspective, it's the turnovers. They're making way too many mistakes on the offensive side of the football. And this part is interesting. I actually looked back at, I'm working on a piece on Garrett's first 2 years as a head coach and kind of looking back at what the team has done statistically with him as head coach compared to the 32 games prior to him taking over. And one thing that I thought was very interesting was that at the end of 2010 and all of 2011, this team actually has a positive turnover ratio. In other words, they've actually been forcing more turnovers than they were giving up. This year, it's the complete opposite. It's completely skewed, and you can see the issues they're having, throughout the football team by the fact that they can't seem to hang on to the football offensively and avoid the mistakes that really crippled them against the Bears. They crippled them last weekend against the Giants. They seem to cripple them against the Ravens as well late in the game. If you're a fan or an objective observer, it's the turnovers that are just driving you nuts right now.
Well, and then specifically because everybody has turned on Romo now. The fans he has had, the defenders he's had, they're becoming fewer and farther between. How much of this can you lay right directly at the feet of Tony Romo?
Well, it's a team game, so from a certain perspective, you have to distribute the blame. But Tony Romo is the guy taking the snaps. He's the guy reading the defenses. He's the guy that's deciding where the football goes within the framework of the offense. And you look at last week's game, I could safely say that two of those interceptions were his fault. The one that he threw to Austin to the wrong shoulder, and the one earlier in the ball game before that was his fault as well.
Jason Pierre-Paul picking it off. Yep.
That really wasn't his fault. Pierre-Paul made a great play.
Yes, he
That
did.
was actually a well-designed screenplay. Jason Pierre-Paul just did a great job of hiding himself from Tony Romo and just went up and plucked the ball out of the air. It was a great play. But, at the end of the day, it's the quarterback. It boils down to the decisions that he makes, whether they're right or they're wrong. He's going to have to live with it, and the team has to live with it. I would say 75% of it, it's on him. And I think a question you have to ask yourself if you're Jerry Jones and if you're the Cowboys organization, you're 6 years into this, Tony Romo being your starting quarterback. Is this all you're going to get? Is this his ceiling? Has he reached the point where he's given you everything he can give you, outside of effort and everything? But as far as his skill, his ability, how he reads defenses, how he handles the football team, is this all you're going to get? Has he reached his maximum ceiling? And if he has, can you live with that?
What's your feeling?
My feeling is he's reached his ceiling. I think this is who he is. He is a very good quarterback. He has a great arm. He can do some incredible things with the football, especially when you get him out in space. I wish Jason Garrett would not design more plays to get him out in space and let him throw in the run, because that seems to be when he throws the best. But you're going to have to accept the fact that he's going to have a couple of games every year where he just lays an absolute egg. And you're going to have to accept the fact that there are going to be some times when he's going to make a bad decision, whether it be an interception or a fumble. And more often than not with Tony Romo, as opposed to guys like Peyton Manning and Drew Brees and Eli Manning, those errors seem to come at critical points in the football game. So, if you accept the fact that Tony Romo has reached his ceiling, which, that's kind of my feeling at this point, then you have to decide whether or not that's good enough or whether it's time to move on.
All right, and then the rest of the venom goes toward the play calling right now that's going on with Jason Garrett. What's your evaluation of that at this point?
I'm kind of half and half on his play calling. I felt as if he called a very bad play at the end of the Ravens game, where he threw the short, or had Romo throw the short pass to Bryan. It only ended up in a 1-yard gain. Now, what happened after that was up to the team not getting to the offensive line. But when you have a situation like that where you need about 5-10 more yards for your kicker, and you throw a 1-yard pass as opposed to throwing a 5 or a 10-yard route, and you still have a timeout to burn, that to me is a bad play call, because you're not putting your offense in a good situation. I felt overall that Garrett called a pretty decent game Sunday against the Jets. The one play I have a real quibble with was the one at the end of the ball game, or the series at the end of the ball game, where they had 2nd and 1.
Mm-hmm.
They ran 3 plays. All 3 of them were pass plays. They couldn't get anything done. And, the last play, I didn't feel like it was a very good play call, where Romo basically had to scramble for 20 yards and then had to throw it away, basically. I don't think that Garrett called a play that allowed enough guys to get open on that play. The Giants did a good job, but the construct of the play, in my mind, just wasn't very good. So, part of it, I think Garrett is not necessarily calling the right plays at critical points in the football game. You could certainly make a quibble there that, when the game gets down to it, he doesn't seem to be making the right play calls.
All right, so based on what you just said a few minutes ago about Tony Romo, you think he's hit his ceiling, this is what he's going to be. Can that be good enough if you surround him with better players?
I think that's the decision that Jerry Jones is going to have to come to in the offseason, because you have to remember Tony Romo is in his contract year next year.
Mm-hmm.
He's owed $11 million. His cap fee is actually going to be more like $16 million. But it's the last year of his contract. So if you're Jerry Jones and you accept that that's his ceiling, like you said, do you go out and find him better guys? Do you go out and find him better offensive linemen so he's better protected? Do you go out and find yourself a better running back? Somebody who can perform at a higher level and stay healthy, unlike Felix Jones or DeMarco Murray? Do you go out and find another wide receiver, either through free agency or the draft? You can make a case that if you protect him with the right amount of talent and give him the right amount of insulation in the passing game, that he can perform at a level that can help you get back to the postseason. But if you think that it's him, if you think that's it, and you think that there's a guy out there that can get you more, then if you're Jerry Jones, it behooves you to explore free agency. It even behooves you to explore the draft, because there could be some decent quarterbacks in this draft that might have a higher ceiling than Tony Romo. It's a very critical decision in the juncture of this franchise, because if you remember, Troy Aikman retired in 2000, and Jerry Jones had absolutely no backup plan. And this team went through a bunch of let's just call them posers, because that's what they were at quarterback until they found Tony Romo. And they just kind of lucked into Romo. They just found him one day as an undrafted free agent and developed him under Bill Parcells. So the last thing Jerry Jones can do at this point is get caught without a backup plan if he decides to go away from Tony Romo, which I'm really not convinced he will. Jerry seems to have a real soft spot for Romo, and my personal belief is that at some point in the offseason, Jones will probably give in and extend him for 4 or 5 years. Doesn't necessarily mean he won't draft a quarterback in the middle of the draft this year and try and develop one, but I have a hunch that Romo will be with Dallas beyond 2013.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that it's already beyond having a backup plan. I think that he should have had this backup plan in place already, and he hasn't done it, and that's just the way it works out. So, all right, enough of that, because there's no cure for Jerry Jones. So talking about it's kind of a waste of time. The one thing that is interesting is that Dallas over the last few years has had a history of knocking off unbeaten teams who then go on and go to the Super Bowl and win it. This weekend they face an undefeated Atlanta team in Atlanta, and again, the history has shown the Cowboys to beat teams like this. Do you think that's a possibility this weekend?
I do. I think it's a bit unlikely, but I think what it really boils down to is turnovers. A few weeks ago, I kind of crunched some numbers, and the numbers suggest that when the Cowboys don't commit a turnover, or they commit just one turnover, they have a very good chance of beating a team like Atlanta. It really comes down to not giving your opponent extra possessions. They gave the Giants 6 extra possessions last weekend, and it cost them. They gave the Bears 5 extra possessions a few weeks ago, and it cost them. When they don't turn the football over, they're usually in the football game, and they actually win more often than they don't against teams like Atlanta. So it really boils down to whether or not Tony Romo and the offense is going to protect the football. If they protect the football, if they don't turn it over, they've got a good chance of winning. If they turn it over more than twice, actually, if they turn it over more than once, they're probably in trouble.
Listen, we don't even want to talk about turnovers at this point. But one thing I did find very interesting is that once and for all, finally, it's Des Bryant who says he's been taken off the punt return team. Now, after all the screw-ups back there, he's got to be the one to finally say, yeah, I finally have been taken off the punt return. Why is this taking so long?
Well, I think they're in love with Des Bryant's talent overall, and I think they feel like I think the Cowboys have always felt like he could be a difference maker on punt returns, and he was his rookie year. If you look at the numbers, he actually did a very good job on punt returns his rookie year, but those numbers went down last year. The numbers have gone down again this year, and of course, just the litany of mistakes against Carolina, and then the back-breaking mistake against the Giants last weekend. They didn't have any choice at that point. They had to make a change, and they made it immediately, putting in Dwayne Harris on punt returns. The fact that nobody within the organization will come out and say Des Bryant is no longer on the punt return team, that it actually takes Des Bryant to do it, I guess you could take it 2 different ways. One, maybe Des Bryant is accepting responsibility for the mistakes that he's made and is basically saying to the media, I accept the responsibility. I'm off the punt return team. Let's move on. Or maybe it's the organization just not wanting to hurt the guy's feelings. We have the Des rules now. There are certain things that Des Bryant is not supposed to do, officially or unofficially, according to the Cowboys. And maybe this is just a situation where the Cowboys don't want to, they're worried about his state of mind. They don't want to hurt his ego at this point. They don't want to hurt his feelings, I guess would be the best way of putting it. And they basically are dancing around the subject. To me, if you're Jason Garrett, I think you come right out and say, if it's about accountability, you come right out and say, he's not getting it done. We're making a change, and that hasn't happened. So I think it's more about massaging his feelings than accountability.
Oh, boy, this drives me crazy. All right, well, let's end on a high note. You and a lot of other folks in the Dallas area media have written tributes, basically, to Jason Witten, who gets a chance to break Michael Irvin's all-time Cowboys reception record this weekend. Talk a little bit about how this guy is going to be remembered, and is his career going to ultimately end with him being ringless?
Wow, I was actually just writing something about this a little bit earlier. First of all, I think Jason Witten is probably the closest approximation to a guy like Roger Staubach that you're going to get out of this team in recent memory. And when I say that, I mean a guy who is respected, a guy who is well regarded in the community, a guy who performs incredibly well on the field and puts his team ahead of his own numbers. I mean, Jason Witten has gotten his numbers within the framework of the offense and without a lot of bluster and without a lot of chest pumping. I mean, and those guys are few and far between nowadays in professional football. I ultimately think, based on the way tight ends are regarded in the NFL and based on the fact that there are only 8 tight ends in the NFL Hall of Fame, that Jason Witten will likely end up in the NFL Hall of Fame, maybe not in the first ballot, but when you consider he probably has 4 or 5 good years left in his career, that he's well within being able to catch 1,000 passes as a tight end, which would make him the second tight end to do it after Tony Gonzalez. I don't think there's any question his numbers would get him in the Hall of Fame one day. As far as a ring, that's entirely up to the other 21 guys in the team that play with him every week. Jason Witten's only one of 22 guys. And with Jason Witten, you get maximum effort. With Jason Witten, you get everything from him every week. And it's just going to be a matter of whether or not Jerry Jones can surround him with the kind of talent that can help him get to a Super Bowl one day. Consider this. They've played 7 games this year. Witten has 52 catches. That's top 10 in the NFL. He's basically done it in 5 games because if you remember, he didn't have a catch against the Giants in the opener, and he dropped 4 passes in the game against Seattle. So basically, he's gotten his numbers in 5 games. I mean, that's just incredible.
Yeah, he's had an unbelievable year, and especially coming back from the spleen surgery and the injury. And, I mean, the guy is a warrior. He's just a warrior, no question about it. Matthew, thank you very much for coming on with us today. We appreciate it. You did a wonderful job of expertly pounding the Cowboys, and we appreciate it. I tip my hat to you for that, okay?
Well, I hope there's a little less pounding next week. It would be nice to talk about them positively for a change.
It would, because the anger level is getting real high around here, I can tell you.
It definitely is, and I can tell you if they lose Sunday, personally, I think their season's over, but we'll see what happens on Sunday.
Ooh, you're probably right. All right, Matthew, thank you very much. Be sure and check out Matthew Postins' work on rattleandhumsports.com on Bryan Houston Sports Radio Live, 99.3 Talk FM. Back in just a moment, and we'll be talking to the head football coach at White Oak. Their team's getting ready for a big ball game this weekend. We'll be talking to Jerry Stanford coming up.